Are we recording? Okay, great. Sorry, it didn't alert me. Hi, y'all. So glad you could be here. We are going to be talking about the behaviors and skills that promote learning. So to just get us started, we would love it if you could open your chat window and share with us your name and what your role is in your school or district in the chat, just so we've got kind of a sense of who's here with us today. And we will do some introductions for our team. I am Lauren Jenks Jones. I am the Executive Director of Early Childhood here at the State Department of Ed. I have been at the State Department for about 3 years, coming up on 3 years rather. And before that was a kindergarten teacher and an instructional coach, and also a math specialist in my prior roles. But really my heart and my love is with all things early childhood and supporting teachers and administrators to support our littlest learners. So I'm very, very happy to have you all here and be sharing this session with you tonight. I'll put it to Rachel to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Rachel Maley. I'm an early childhood specialist on Lauren's team. I taught second grade for 15 years before I moved into administration in a pre-K 8 building. So I am excited to be here with you guys and share some knowledge and gain wisdom from you. You guys are the real experts putting your feet on the ground out there. So excited to be here with you tonight.
I'm Nicole Silvestri. I am the other early childhood specialist on Lauren's team. And I was a kindergarten and first grade teacher, and then a instructional coach, and then most recently in admin. But I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight and supporting and focusing on ECE.
Yeah, we've also got another member of our team, Clarissa, and I'll let her introduce herself as well, just quickly.
Hello, I'm Clarissa Corkins. I am a fellow with the Society for Research in Child Development. And so I am placed with Lauren at the early childhood but the group Early Childhood Education at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And so I am just learning about research and policy and how everything connects into early childhood. And my experience is actually in preschool, mostly preschool and a little bit of kindergarten. So.
Great. Well, it looks like from what I'm seeing in the chat, we've got some kindergarten folks. Whoop, whoop. That's exciting. And this session will be perfect for you all. We hope that you're going to just walk away with some ideas and things to get you thinking about how to really support your students with these behaviors and skills that we think are going to set them up well for academics, both now and in the futures. So to get us just kicked off, I would love to hear from everyone. Since we have such a small group, I'm hoping everyone might be willing to go off to turn on their mic and share what sheep are you from this little graphic we have here. How are you feeling after your day today? And I can share, I think I am probably number 8. I'm jazzed up and excited to share all the stuff we've been planning with you all today. And so I'm kind of raring to go and Rachel, will you share with us which one you are?
I'm really a toss up right now between 3 and 4. The last little bit of the day has just been really hard and fast. I've had a lot of great working time, and I can't figure out if the wool is over my eyes or the bucket is over my head, but one of those two things has happened this afternoon. But I'm really excited to maybe by the end of tonight be a number 9.
Yes, exactly. Nicole, where are you?
I'm feeling a little bit like 8, but for different reasons, probably because you can hear I have my baby just yelling in the background and didn't take a long nap this afternoon. So it's probably going to be a little bit chaotic, but I'm good. I'm feeling good.
That's the best thing about having early childhood educators is they all are okay with those noises in the background. Clarissa, how are you feeling today?
I feel like I'm feeling number 2. I'm pretty content today. Nothing really was happening too exciting. Just sort of going with the flow and just being there, and happy to be here and meet everyone.
Love it. Hannah, would you be willing to share which one you are today?
I am probably a number 2 as well. Just busy day, but I've been looking forward to the training and just excited. And it's nice to have an empty classroom. So
Yes, that's always nice at the end of the day. Awesome. Thank you. Deidre, would you be willing to share?
Yeah, but I am nothing like what you guys are. I'm gonna
That's
say
okay.
number 5. It's been a day.
We completely understand. We have all absolutely been there. And that's why there is the wide range on this sheet. And I don't know if you're able to come off mute and share with us as well. Maybe not. Okay, so I don't think Anne's going to be able to share with us, but that's totally okay. So I love this activity. It's also a really, I see Anne in the chat. She's on her desktop. She said she's probably a 3. Yep, definitely been there at some points today too. I love this little activity. This is one of those things that you could also do in your classroom with your students as you're kind of doing a check-in. It's a really fun way. When I was looking this up, there's lots of versions with cats and dogs and all kinds of different animals to do that check-in. So it's nice to just take a moment and kind of think about where we are before we jump into this learning. Wanted you all to have this link right up front, this bit.ly here, bit.ly/ECE landing page. And that's all lowercase, we'll get you there. When you log on to that link, you're going to be taken to a Google Doc in which we've got a kind of a running records of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And it also has a link to a PDF version of this presentation so that you can access it later and have it to use and reference as we kind of move forward, but wanted to make sure everyone has that bit.ly/ECE landing page. And I'm sure one of my colleagues can put it in the chat for us as well, just to make sure that it is living on there. So now I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the next 50 minutes that we've got together. So the purpose of this webinar was to really talk about what are those essential skills and those behaviors that we think that students really need to have in order to be set up for success while they're in your classroom, but also like throughout their lives. What are those things that are kind of those, we talk about them, sometimes they're called soft skills, sometimes they're called non-academic skills, but we know that that is not true at all. They are really essential core skills, right? And so that's why we kind of use that language of skills and behaviors that promote learning. So we're really going to dig into a couple of those pieces, and we're going to share some ideas to just how to tackle those things in your class. Today is going to be very much a spitfire, like just shooting out ideas. A lot of it is going to be stuff that you may have heard of before, and that's okay. It's just a reminder of some of the things that you can do, reaching back into your toolkit and having actual strategies to lean on as you're thinking about how to develop these skills and behaviors in your class and with your students. So it's really just going to be a ton of ideas that we have. And we're also hoping that you all will share your knowledge with us as well. As Rachel said at the beginning, we have so much to learn from you. You are the practitioners. You have all the wonderful ideas. And as much as we can learn from you, we want to do that as well. So the reason that we're doing this session in particular right now and why we're offering this webinar series is because we've been hearing from the field that this year is unique. Students are walking in the door at a very different level than they have in the past. There is just some gaps in the experiences that kids have had prior to walking into our classrooms that's leading to some gaps in these key skills, right? So we've been out doing regional meetings this fall and just heard from a lot of folks that these soft skills, these behaviors are just not in the same place that they've seen them in the past. Kids are not in going on play dates, and they're not going to church nursery, and they may be on screens more than they have been in the past. And all of that is having a direct impact in our classrooms. So we want to make sure that we're hearing our ECE community in Oklahoma and responding to that and giving you all the supports and things that can help immediately now in the moment. Luckily, we're well positioned to do that because we have been working on a tool. I'm going to talk about this tool and then go back to that list. We've been working on a tool called the Early Learning Inventory, which is a kindergarten observational tool that teachers can use in it. It allows you to get a really good picture of where students are in your class using these rubrics, these scaled rubrics in 26 indicators across 6 different domains. Deidre, you're in our pilot, aren't you? Yeah, that's right. So we have one of our pilot participants who's been using the tool this year, who hopefully would tell you that it is a really holistic tool. It doesn't just cover those core academic things like the literacy and the math and the science skills, but it really hits some of these more holistic skills, right? So things like fine motor, self-control, independence, focus, cooperative play, and social problem solving. So we are using some of the language of this early learning inventory that our team has been digging into and creating support structures for to talk about this stuff today. So it's going to help us kind of paint the picture. If you want more information on the early learning inventory, there's tons to learn about on that sde.ok.gov/early learning inventory. There's how you can sign up for the training. There's how you can access the tool, a little bit more background information. So we encourage you to look at that as well. We fielded a little bit of a survey as folks signed up for this session. And some of the trends that we heard were things that you saw in that last slide. Things like self-control, self-regulation, self-management are a big topic of focus right now. The other thing is students interacting with each other. So that social problem solving and cooperation. We're also just hearing that there's really some high levels of frustration from kids, and meltdowns are happening a little bit more frequently. And also there's some gaps in fine motor development. So kids don't have that dexterity that they may have walked in with in the past. So we want to make sure that we're trying to hit as many of these things as we can in this session. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that by sharing with you kind of what we think these categories kind of look like, and then what are some ideas to actually target those in our classrooms. So with that, we're going to jump right into the very first one, which is fine motor skills. So I'm going to hand it over to Nicole to talk about that.
Yes, thank you. So, and how we're going to do this is we're going to essentially share like the vision of what we would want kids to look like if they were proficient in these skills, specifically like towards the end of kindergarten, for like beginning of first grade. What would it look like for them to be proficient in fine motor skills? So that would be students using writing and crafting tools with mature forms. So like using a 3-point grip, holding those correctly, using writing and crafting tools to write and cut in a more detailed way. So being able to cut along more intricate shapes, like being able to turn their scissors really well, and write smaller too, because we know, when kids first start to us, their letters are really big, but we want them to be able to write smaller, write more details, draw details on their pictures, and like that, which leads to the last bullet point, adding more intricate details to their work products. So in the next slide, we have some tips and strategies of how you can target these things, but also we know that you all have a plethora of knowledge and experience too. So there's going to be time for you to be able to share as well. But so increasing complexity with Play-Doh. So we know, working with Play-Doh really works out those muscles in their hands, and going from just totally free play to having them form words and intricate pictures. So we have some pictures off the side too, to indicate what we envision, what we're talking about. So, the smaller things that they can manipulate helps build those muscles in their hand too. Practicing opening and closing snaps, buttons, Velcro, zippers. I found these online. Obviously, the one on the left is one that can be purchased, but the one on the right is more of a homemade thing that you can, glue a zipper to a piece of felt and have them practice doing that, or buttons, and then like glue a piece of felt on top and have them button and unbutton. And then obviously practicing cutting paper and progress to more complex shapes. So you can see like they're just, so this could be like a great center for kids that are still struggling with it, giving them different kinds of lines to follow. And then also, this isn't on this page, but putting stickers on your scissors for how to hold the scissors, because holding scissors correctly is, we've seen the kids who are like holding them like this, sometimes holding them completely incorrectly. So putting those scissors as a clue for like, oh, my thumb goes here, my index finger goes here, and that will help them a lot. And I believe I have a second page or no, okay. And then, so a ton more. So painting with various utensils and progressing in difficulty. So, if you have kids that are really struggling with this, using something that's wider, like cotton balls, or like in the picture, a brush, those are things that kids can grip more easily. And then progressing to those smaller things that they have to, use that 3-point grip more for. So like a Q-tip, and then you could cut the Q-tip in half to make it even smaller. In using tweezers. So same concept, using big tweezers, then going to little tweezers, picking up big things versus picking up little things. That picture on the right, that would be, that's really intricate. So that would be someone with strong fine motor skills, whereas picking up big beads, big cotton balls, things like that would be for someone who's more struggling. And then stringing beads. And as you can see, these centers also, you can link them with academic standards. So you're tying this critical skill of something that's fine motor with sorting, with making patterns, with one-to-one correspondence. So it doesn't have to live in isolation. You can find that overlap.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking the exact same thing, Nicole, when you were talking about that, the idea of it's so easy with so many of these things to bring in those core academic skills and your standards into that. Wanted to point you to the interactive note sheet that we provided that link for. If you click on that main page, the fine motor skills, it gives you a bookmark and drops you down to where you all can add your ideas here too. So if you have something that you do in your classroom or you think would be a good idea to help develop fine motor skills, please just add it to that list. It is a great place then you can go back and reference in the future, and we want to hear from you. I'm going to talk a little bit about self-control. This one's a big one and it's a big category and it kind of means a lot of things. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. So with self-control, we know we want students to be able to follow a routine, and not just a simple one, not just, hey, go do this, but a multi-step routine, and adhere to the high expectations within that. So if there is a way that is expected of them to behave during one of those routines, they are able to do that. We want them, when they're exhibiting self-control, to be able to share their equipment and their space with others. So that's, not pushing someone out of their space and being able to hand over something and actually do that back and forth interchange. We want them to take responsibility for their behavior. So when they make a mistake, being able to acknowledge that and move forward so that they are learning from those mistakes and not making them again. We also, this is kind of where we get into the idea of meltdown. So we want them to be able to demonstrate their wants and needs and their feelings. Those are all really important skills for us to have as adults, but we want them to do that in the healthiest of ways, right? We want them to be able to feel the feeling and put it out into the world in the healthiest way possible. And we also want them to be able to listen. And when we talk about listening, that's not just to their teacher or a direction, but really to each other. Like, what does it mean to listen to my peer? So we're going to talk about some strategies for self-control. So there's some really easy games that you can play in your classroom. You can play them at recess. It could be a whole group game that are automatically going to be working with student self-control. So the first example is doing red light, green light. I mean, just a classic, but it really promotes their ability to control their body. And that's kind of the first step in that self-control process. A way to elevate that is, if students are starting to get bored of red light, green light, you can switch it, right? And say, now green means red and red means green. And then their brain is having to do a more complex action, or you could change the colors and it could be purple light, orange light. And different colors could be different ways that they can move forward, right? Like they can skip forward or they can crawl forward. So there's lots of ways to add complexity to that allows them to practice that again. You can have them do something as basic as freeze dance. I don't know if any of you all have seen that show Bluey at the beginning, where it's got them doing the freeze dance right at the beginning. So even playing that Bluey song and letting them do freeze dance there. My favorite in this example is something that in my classroom I call bubble trouble. which is really getting students to understand that a lot of the time they really want their body to move and their body is trying to tell them to move, but they have to tell their body to stay still, or they have to tell their body to not do something that it's not supposed to do. So with that, I would take my bubbles, and all of my students had to be statues. And even if a bubble landed on your nose, you weren't allowed to move. So the bubbles are falling all around them. They're like dying of laughter. They just want to reach out and grab them. It's the thing that they would love to do more than anything, but they can't. And they're really practicing, focusing on telling their bodies what to do instead of their bodies telling them what to do. It's so fun, and they don't realize that they're actually developing a skill during that time. So another thing to focus on with self-control is the idea of consistency. So many of you may have heard of this idea of the marshmallow test, where you put a marshmallow down in front of a kid and see if they are able to wait or to delay that gratification by not eating it right now, and they can wait and get 2 marshmallows if they can wait. And many kids have a really hard time doing that. And part of the reason can be if they don't trust that the person will follow through with the second marshmallow, right? So if we don't say what we mean and mean what we say and follow through on what we promise to our students, then that trust erodes, and them trusting us to follow through on our end of the bargain makes it harder for them, right? So if a student is coming up to us as we're talking to another teacher and we ask them to wait until we're done, and then as soon as we're finished talking, we look at them and thank them for waiting and then engage with them, that's building that trust and that consistency. But if I tell them to wait and then I never actually listen to them after they've waited patiently during that time, I'm eroding that trust and I'm eroding that consistency. So we want to make sure that they can trust us to follow through so that they can exhibit that self-control and that kind of more delayed gratification. Also thinking about just the fact that self-control in adults wanes throughout the day. It is much harder not to eat. If you're on a diet, it is much harder at the end of the day when you're sitting there and have used all your willpower to not eat the donut and not eat the cookies at lunch and not eat all of that stuff at the end of the day than it is at the beginning, right? It's the same thing for kids. So if you are doing an activity that requires a high level of self-control and self-regulation, put it in the morning. Don't set yourself up for failure by putting those kind of activities later in the afternoon. Kids are not going to be well positioned to do them. So just think about that as you're kind of planning out your day and set kids up for success in that way. Another thing with self-control is that students at this age, reminders are essential. In so many instances, it's not because they don't want to be exhibiting self-control. They just don't know what it looks like in a given situation. So we have to remind them and remind them and remind them and remind them and give them tools for them to check in on themselves and to be able to exhibit that self-control. One example I love of that is if your classroom is getting rather noisy. Let's say you have an activity in which you've asked students to whisper. And it's starting to get really loud. It's starting to get noisy. One way that they can exhibit self-control is by doing something called check your neck, where if you're talking, your vocal cords are moving and you can feel it vibrating when you touch your neck. But if you're whispering, you can't feel it. So if you're actually whispering, you're not going to feel those vocal cords moving. So you can just have kids, if things are getting too loud, ask them to check their neck to make sure that they're whispering. That's allowing them to exhibit their own self-control and monitor their own actions. A couple more things to help students develop that self-control is the idea of having students practice planning, right? So if I have a plan for what I'm going to do during a time, I'm less likely to get off track. I'm more likely to be able to keep myself going with that plan. So planning could be in writing, which is the examples that you see here. So on this one, Saul, before he went to his center, said, I am going to make a castle. So he actually, in his writing, before he went to that center, created this plan. This is actually a Tools of the Mind strategy that they use in that curriculum, creating that that plan for your play. The one below is for students who are a little bit higher, where they actually say who they're going to play with. They make a plan for how they're going to play together, which is bringing in that collaborative piece. And then they actually talk about what happened afterwards. So it gives them a chance to also decompress that experience and talk about what actually happened as a result of them playing together. Really gives them that ability to set a plan and then stick with it in a different way, or at least reflect on it. The other thing that older students can do is work on delayed gratification through incentive systems. So something like a ticket system or a dollar, like a bucks system for positive behaviors can lead to bigger prizes, right? So if you have $2, you can get this little eraser, but if you save all of your money, you can get a pizza party, or we can come in together and have popsicles as a class, right? So using that with some of your second and third grade students can start to teach them that they can delay that gratification and have that self-control in the short and long term. So it looks like we've got some ideas in the self-control too, with class dojo points and group time signals to control talking over each other or the teacher. I love that. Those are really great ideas. Awesome. I also wanted to point out on that page over there that you've got a list of books that are really great books to use in your whole group instruction to talk about these topics as well. So you've got a whole list right there that you can pull from your library if you want to target these skills too during your literacy time. All right, I'll throw it to Rachel for independence.
All right, so as we're talking about independence, we want the students to be able to self-initiate activities and demonstrate independence during the activities, routines, and play. And so when we're thinking about independence, this actually can go two different ways. So we have students who are overly independent, and then we have students who are very dependent on you and very dependent on their parents and those caretakers that they have. So being able to find this balance where they are able to initiate their own activities and demonstrate this ability to have this activity, the routines and the play. We want them to be able to maintain that for an extended period of time. And we want them to be able to work with their peers to overcome their problems and only call on those adults when it's necessary. We often see this in center time. Lauren, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide for me. We see this a lot in center time. In one routine that you can establish, I would have teachers tell me all the time, I can't get anything done in centers because it's constantly, they need me, but I really need to be able to work at my teacher table. So one strategy I always had for my classroom was ask 3 before you ask me. And additionally, we would have class leaders within those groups in which you could say, ask me, and I had badges where they could wear this badge and they knew that that person was an expert at that center and they could go ask them for support in that area. Also just making sure that there's a schedule. I don't know how many times you've been asked when's lunch, and maybe that's just a second grade thing. I don't know, but lunch is very important. Recess is very important. PE is very important. And so having that visual representation to whatever degree you need to have that is extremely important for them to continue to develop that strategy of being able to rely on themselves to know what the routine, what the process is going to be. Some kids need individual schedules. Some kids are okay with being able to read those clock times, right? But others just need to kind of know the order of their day in order to establish that independence for themselves. So just learning what that level of provision needs to be for that schedule. I'm ready now, Lauren, sorry. So also just having a set procedure for and regularly engaging in free choice time. I think free choice as teachers is very stressful because we want to be able to give them this independence and we're trying to teach them to have this independence, but then we don't often regularly allow them to engage in that, whether that's because we don't have a routine set up for that, or we're just really not sure how to relinquish that control. It becomes an issue. And so just setting up a procedure for that and knowing that you're going to regularly engage in that. Sometimes it's going to be a wild success and other times it's going to be a failure, but just having a procedure in place for what that free time looks like. And oftentimes we also have to think about choices that they make. We can't give choices in helping develop independence that you can either clean up those blocks or you can go to timeout, right? But rather maybe it's you can clean up the triangles or you can clean up the squares before first. Which would you like? Because the ultimate goal is to teach them to be independent for themselves and clean up that area or whatever it might be. And we want to do that in a way that's not necessarily two choices, that one is they're doing it and one is they're not doing it at all, but rather two choices within that activity that promotes and prompts them to reach out in that way and take independence in that task. Also, we want to be sure that we're setting goals with students and checking in with them around their progress. The older the students get, the more data tracking you can allow them to do of their own progress. But there's also very explicit ways to do that with younger students, whether it's their academic skills or whether it's just setting a goal for themselves as far as that self-control or that focus. We're going to be setting this timer for 7 minutes. Let's set a goal of getting X amount of things done in that 7 minutes, right? But also, there's a lot of opportunity for tracking with technology where students can track their own work and begin to see their own independence in that. Seesaw is a great option for that. There are other apps where you can document progress in that way. Students also need responsibility in order to develop independence. And so one way we can do that in the classroom is just setting up those specific tasks or classroom chores. My middle son, we often said he's best when we've given him a job, right? And you've had those kids in your class too that just need a job in order to stay on task. Probably likely because they're extremely independent in their own way. And so they need to see that you support them in their independence. So giving them those jobs and allowing them to explore in that way really helps. Oh, I was thinking I had one more, but that's the next. So just remembering, looking at that book list of just developing those skills of on both sides of the spectrum of developing them to be independent from I don't want to be big to helping tame that independence all by myself. Great ideas in the chat as well.
So the next skill is focus, and we know that can be really challenging for kids. Focusing, paying attention on one thing for an extended period of time, and what we really want is for them to focus on a task for like over 15 minutes by the end of the year. Ideally stretching it to maybe 20, though I know that that's hard to assess in the classroom because we don't have that much time. We rarely have that much time to give them to focus that unlimited amount of time on one thing, but trying to get them to focus on a self-selective task for at least 15 minutes. So they should be able to ignore most distractions and return to their activity and eventually ask for adult support after trying to solve the issue on their own at least once. So that's how we're defining focus. So some strategies for this is set timers for their independent work or small group activities, and then gradually increase that time over the course of the year. And then obviously, especially if our kids can't tell time, a timer that's visual is really key. So I picked out these two timers because they can actually see, like on the clock on the left, they can actually see the color getting smaller as a signal to them that the time is going down. And then there's also, I know they sell these at Lakeshore, you probably get them cheaper on Amazon and stuff too, but big timers that are 5 minutes. That can be good for kids who are really struggling, who just need to start off small with 5-minute tasks. So that's a really good visual cue for them. And playing games, playing one consistent game like memory, where they really have to pay attention to the cards, working on puzzles, specific, like different kinds of card games. Those help build their focus, and then eventually increasing to more complex board games. Like if they can sit and play a game for over 15 minutes, they're nailing focus. It just sometimes, it's something that they have to have some interest in, which is key. So I'll skip to that last bullet. Using their interest in tasks is going to push their focus to the next level. So if they hate writing center, let them write about something that interests them. Like maybe they have a favorite TV show that they want to write about, or they got a new toy that they're really excited about, and tell them they can write and draw all about that at the writing center. And then all of a sudden this task, they can focus more on this task. And then going back up one, part of focus, is being able to solve problems on their own and stay kind of related to independence, but staying on task and not getting distracted by getting up to find you or getting up to talk to their friends, or so creating some sort of signal with them to indicate that they need help. So those popsicle sticks, that could be great at centers, like if they needed your help and wanted you to come over. The color-coded cups could be good on their desks if they're doing independent work time. So some variation of that. Obviously, you don't have to do either of those. You could come up with your own signal. Those are just some ideas.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So next we're going to talk about cooperative play. So we have kind of talked about the individual skills, right? We talked about fine motor, we talked about focus, independence. All of those things are more on the individual level. Now we're going to talk about what that means when they're starting to interact with their peers and how we're going to actually support that. So when we're talking about cooperative play, and then we'll talk about social problem solving. So we're kind of separating that ability to work with others into two kind of categories. So like, how do we play with someone at all, and then how do we overcome challenges when we're working with others? So for cooperative play, we're just talking about being able to be in a space, be respectful of themselves and others, right? We don't want them to be bulldozed by strong leaders in our classroom, and we want them to make sure that they're being respectful and kind to their peers. We want them to be able to take turns. That's a fundamental in cooperative play, right? And that is something that we have heard repeatedly is challenging right now. We want them to be able to accept direction. So if my friend has an idea for how they want to play in dramatic play today, I want to be able to listen to that and take that in, and not only be able to do it the way that I thought that we were going to be able to do it today. And that's, again, showing that flexibility. So not being just completely stuck on the way that I want to do it or the thing that I want to do. So to do that, this first slide is mostly about kind of the overall things that we can think about and explicitly teach them. So the first thing is to start talking about why. Why does it matter that we collaborate with our peers? Why does it matter that we play nicely and fairly? Why does it, kids, when you can give them that fundamental why, they're so much more bought into whatever they're doing. So give them great examples. If there are teams that they love, if they're really into football or basketball or whatever it may be, talk about all of the people that have to work together to make that happen, right? That what it means for them to collaborate and cooperate to get a job done. But even if they're like, let's say they're super into YouTube unboxing videos, right? There's still a team that has to work together probably to make that happen, right? Somebody's got to get the materials, then you've got the person who's filming, and then you've got the person who's being recorded, and then somebody probably has to put it up on and share it with everyone, right? So there's, even in some of those things that you may not think about, use those student interests and what they love to talk about why it's really important that we're able to collaborate with each other. We also can teach explicitly how to share, right? I think there's an assumption that we just say, make sure you're sharing, and then they will know what that means and what to do. They actually may not. So we may have to take a step back and talk about explicit ways to share. So we could divide the things that we're working with, right? If we're at the block center, I can take these blocks and you can take these blocks. Or we could use them together. We can have them all in the middle, and I'm going to take the ones that I need and you take the ones that you need, and we're creating something together. We could trade things. If I've got something that you want and you want something that I have, we could, right? We do that trade, or we can just take turns and wait. So if I've got the car that my teacher put in the block center and you want to use it, how do you ask me for it and then wait if I'm not ready to give it up yet, right? So explicitly teaching those things, modeling them, practicing them on a small scale, so when they go to do it, they're ready to do it in a more explicit way. The other thing that we can explicitly teach is this idea of good listening skills. And on the right here, you can see this whole body listening chart. I feel like the listening posters that I normally say are about your feet are crisscross applesauce and your hands are in your lap and your eyes are on the speaker, right? Which is very teacher focused. But this one I love because it's about listening in general, right? It's talking about we listen with our ears, but we also listen with our eyes. We want to look at someone when they're talking to us. We listen with our mouth by not interrupting, but we also listen with our mind. We're thinking about questions we might want to ask or how we might want to respond. And we also listen with our heart. So would someone that I'm listening to think that what I'm doing and how I'm responding is kind, right? So I love that kind of framework for how we can listen to each other, not just our teacher, but also our peers. Some actual tangible strategies to promote this in your classroom is you could have students work on a collaborative art piece. So let's say they are all going to be creating a big scale picture together, and each person is kind of taking a different part and they're really working together to make a beautiful piece of art. There's also some games. They could do relay races. They can do follow the leader. So, one person is doing an action and everyone has to do it and change the leader all the time, or Simon Says. A couple of teamwork games that are really fun you can see on the right here, there's this maze, right? Where students have, it's pretty simple, just a cardboard box, and they've got a marble in there and they're having to work together to get the ball either through something or through the maze. But it's really important if you're doing that to set expectations at the beginning of how you want them to do that, and then take breaks for them to check in. So if people are starting to get frustrated and you've got that one kid who's like, no, you're supposed to go down, right? You want to be able to take that break and talk about, okay, I saw that you were getting frustrated here. How could you tell your friend that you'd like them to try it in a different way and actually talk through that with them as they're doing it? The other one that you can see here is that hula hoop, and it's got a mark on it, and they just have to get the hula hoop all the way around the circle and back to where it started, that little mark, which once you've taught these and done these whole group, they can go into a center and students can be practicing those together. The last one on here for cooperative play is this idea of a buddy bench. And many of you may have heard of this before. It's the idea, and it doesn't have to be an actual bench. It could just be an area that you have, where if a student doesn't have someone to play with, they can go sit in that area, and everyone in your class then knows that that person needs a friend. That person needs someone to come ask them to play with them during that day. And it's a really, really wonderful way for no one to feel left out or feel like they don't have a place to belong in your classroom. So great little easy way to get that cooperative play going, especially at recess.
All right, so just, tag teaming right off of that collaborative play piece, we have the social problem solving. How do we fix things when things aren't working well? We want them to be able to initiate and complete conflict resolution without little to no adult assistance. We want them to be able to come up with compromises as they're discussing their conflict, and then internalize personal responsibilities of the classroom and those natural consequences that happen because of that. So some ideas and strategies here, which someone mentioned in the chat in the last one. I think that's great. It flows right into this, but using puppets to practice conflict resolution scenarios. So puppets can be used for so many things as far as expressing feelings, learning to work together, establishing roles and rules, all of those things, using finger puppets or hand puppets to be able to talk through those things really does make a difference for students. And that has to be modeled. That's one reason why I picked this picture. This isn't something, again, that we just expect them to know how to do, like sharing. We need to be modeling these things for them so that they are able to see that this is how it's done and this is how it's done properly. Again, tons and tons of books. They're in the comments underneath in the note catcher document, but a couple examples of those. Mean Gene, the Recess Queen. That's the only thing I can think of when I say the title. I can't even say the title by itself. And Huey Fawadney Wat. And Hey Little Ant, all books that kind of help students understand differences within each other that can cause conflict or can cause to be sources of bullying or belittling or not able to develop friendships, so these books really help work through and teaches and models that process of how we work through problems in that way. You can also create anchor charts with problem solving skills during these center and recess times, such as sharing, finding someone new to play with, all of those different ideas of how to do that, and allow them to be a very integral part of that process. Maybe every day during morning meeting for a while, if you're having a really rough time, you establish a new procedure for one of these problem solving skills, and then those go into an area where the students can go back to them. There are obviously many anchor charts that are already developed for you that you can just purchase and buy. I had a set in my classroom and I kept it on the wall, and I would say, I need you to go find a strategy for working this out with your friends. And they would go to the wall. Of course, they were second graders, so they could read, and they would read each suggestion, and they would be able to come up with a way in which they felt like they could tell me that they could solve the solution or solve the problem. And then they would go and work that problem out in that manner. Some other ideas that we have here, and this is a little bit hard to see, but setting up a piece table in your classroom and set up a procedure that goes with it. I liked this breakdown because it gave you some very specific things that ways you could set that up. An object of peace is key in this, right? It can be a stone, a talking stone, where when you're holding the stone, you're sharing. It can be a stick. There's a lot of things, but making sure you have that timer where we're sharing that time to talk and discuss, as well as a proper location where they can be in a peace and calming environment to be able to work this out into a better solution. Another suggestion along with that is teaching them walk, talk, or rock. They can choose if they're going to walk away, talk it out in the end, or talk it out at the end of the line, or play a game of rock, paper, scissors, so they can have choices in the way that they're going to take care of their solutions. And somehow the same one is on there again for the anchor charts.
Great. So we have just word vomited onto you a whole host of ideas on a lot of different topics, but the hope is that you heard something that sparked that said, oh yeah, I'm seeing this challenge. I think that that's something that I might be able to do in my classroom. I want to go back and revisit that strategy. But we want to just underpin all of this with something that we heard from the feedback that we got as you did your registration, which asked you to kind of give a tip of what you would recommend to someone dealing with things in this area. And one of the things that we heard over and over and over and over again is how important relationship building with your students is to accomplish any of these things, right? Without that critical piece, almost none of that can happen. So we wanted to take just a minute to do some brainstorming, and I'm just going to ask you all to go off mute if you've got an idea and share it with us. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you could also put it in the chat. We're not going to do the full breakout rooms, but thinking about how does relationship building foster these type of skills? So how have you seen that be helpful? Like when you had a good relationship, how have you seen that help develop some of these skills in a student? Or what are some ways that we can build trust with students? What are your favorite ways to build those relationships, build that trust with your kids? One example that we got in the responses during the registration was someone suggested the idea of 2x10s, which is the idea that you spend 2 minutes, 2 quality minutes for 10 days in a row with a student that you're having a particular challenge with, or you really want to focus in on building a relationship with because they're exhibiting some kind of struggle in your classroom. You just spend 2 minutes a day with that student individually, getting to know them, talking to them, having that one-on-one exchange for 10 days. And the result of that can be remarkable. What you learn about them, what they learn about you, and the trust that you build during that time can just be really remarkable. So that's one example. What other ideas do you all have in terms of how to build those really strong relationships with your kids to support this kind of learning? Feel free to go off mute or put it in the chat. I know somebody's got something.
I always had greetings when I came in the door. You know, they had options for greetings. They could high five, they could have a hug, they could use their words to tell me. So I had a system. But they always had a way of greeting me, and I greet them back in the same way when they came in. And that was a very simple way of letting them know I care and that I love them and I want them to have a great day in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also that consistency, right? Of like, they know what to expect and they can expect that routine from you. Totally. What else? So I see in the chat, writing drawing time as they come in and share a couple each day at morning meeting. Yeah. So I love that idea because it gives them an opportunity not just to build a relationship with you, but build a relationship with each other too, right? They're getting to share those ideas and their thoughts and opinions with their peers and hear from each other. That's super important. I love that.
And I'm capturing these for you all on the on those interactive notes too. So like Lauren mentioned before, that can be a great place to go to reference these ideas later.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that I have seen be really successful in terms of building those deeper relationships is allowing students to bring, part of themselves into the classroom, whether that's through like a get to know me poster, or even just as simple as asking students if they want to bring pictures of their family or their pets or whatever, and having a space in your classroom where those can be posted. Then as you're talking with students and you can say, wait, remind me who that is again. And how do what do you do with that family member? Or, tell me your pet's name. And it just like gives that opportunity to spark that conversation. And it makes students feel so welcomed in their classroom. Like that is then their space just as much as it is yours, right? So very simple and easy way. I see show and tell on here. That's very huge to be able to express who they are. Sit with students at lunch or make an agenda for play dates on the playground. I love that idea. That's so smart. I know there was a teacher I worked with a few years ago who over the course of the year made it a point to do like either a playground date, and it could be at a local park, or they had a McDonald's close by that had an indoor play place. And they would schedule with the parents and have like a special after school time with that student. And by the end of the year, they made sure that they had that opportunity with all of their students. And the way that kids walked in on the day after that had happened and how special and connected they felt to their teacher was just unbelievable. Obviously, you would want to do that and coordinate with families and think about the logistics and if they could actually, engage in something like that. There's a lot to consider there, but just making that special time for them is so important, as long as you have the capacity to do that. You don't want to put too much on yourself either. Great.
During the COVID times, I had some teachers who really wanted to feel connected still to their students. And I think it really helped them to see that this is something that they wanted to do every single year. But at Christmas, and it was right around Christmas that we were in quarantine and we couldn't be at school. And so they made outdoor visits to their homes. And it not only gave them a perspective of what's going on in their home environment and how they live, but it made those kids feel very valued and important, that my teacher cares enough to make a home visit or to ride the bus one day with me. And I feel like that really lets them know that you're in their corner, that you're there to support them and love them and care for them. And whenever it comes time that there does have to be a discipline issue, it makes it a lot easier because they value you loving them in that way.
Love that. Great.
Hannah, I love that too in the chat. Hannah put a great comment there about drawing and writing little notes and popping them in their mailbox to recognize how special they are.
Yes, that means so much to a kid. I also see one in the relationship building thing about acting silly. co-teacher dressed up as a shark for an activity, and the kids loved it and talked about it for the rest of the year. It's those small moments of joy that really can make a huge amount of impact when you're having to redirect a student for not being able to exhibit self-control, right? Like that's the moments where you can say, I love you and I see you and I value you and I know you can do this, right? It really does make that huge difference. Wonderful. So we're hopeful that you're walking away from this time, at least with one little spark of an idea. So we would love to hear in the chat if you've got that to share with us, one strategy you are hoping to implement in your class to address these skills or behaviors that you heard about or were reminded of today. And then once you've been able to share with us, we have learned so much from you. Thank you so much with our small but mighty group for sharing awesome ideas. And all we ask as we close out our time together is for you to complete this survey for us. Again, there's a bit.ly, or you can use your phone to scan this QR code that will take you to just a short survey to give us some feedback on the session. We are going to be continuing this series on the first Tuesday of every month. Again, they'll be recorded and available to watch later. But we're hoping to dig into some additional topics, like some more of the behavior management side. How does this play out in behavior management, and what does that mean for our early childhood specific classrooms? We're thinking about, digging into, we've got a topic on what does it look like to facilitate that play between students and help them build those relationships even deeper with each other. So we've got some topics coming up. Be on the lookout for those in our early childhood newsletter. But you filling out this survey today will help give us feedback on how we did today and allow us to continue to improve these to best meet your needs. So thank you all so much for being here today and taking your time. It's just it always floors me when you're able to take the end of a very long day to get on a webinar to continue learning on behalf of your kids. That's very, very meaningful and shows how dedicated you are to your craft and your passion, and to your students, most importantly. And we're just so thankful for you and the work that you do. So thanks y'all for being here, and have a wonderful evening. If you've got any questions for us, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes, thank you all.
Great.